Life was once filled with dreams of running and freedom until a car accident left me confined to a wheelchair. Karen, the woman I thought loved me, turned out to be a manipulative monster who drained my disability pension for her own selfish desires. Karen girlfriend humiliates me for being disabled, but she's using my disability pension. Here's how it all went down. I've often thought about how life can turn on a dime. Growing up in a quaint town, my dreams revolved around sports, running, jumping, feeling the wind rush past me. That was my world, my sanctuary. Then, one day, everything changed. A car accident, they said. A moment of bad luck, and suddenly I found myself confined to a wheelchair. My dreams dashed in an instant. Adjusting to this new life wasn't easy. The stares, the pitying looks, the whispered comments, they were almost as painful as the physical injuries. But amidst this trouble, I found comfort in writing, a passion I had long neglected. It became my escape, a way to express the storm of emotions raging inside me. My disability pension was modest, barely enough to make ends meet, but it was mine, a symbol of my struggle and survival. Then, Karen came into my life. She was like a burst of color in my monochrome world. Charismatic, lively, seemingly understanding. I was drawn to her, believing, perhaps naively, that I had found someone who saw beyond my disability. But I was wrong. As time passed, Karen's true nature began to surface, revealing a manipulative and uncaring individual. The story that follows is not just about her betrayal, but also about my journey of realizing my worth and reclaiming my life in a small town that witnessed my highest highs and lowest lows. One day, I discovered that a lot of my money is missing, so I confronted Karen. Karen, what's this? I held up the bank statement, my hands shaking. Not just from my condition, but from the shock and betrayal. She didn't even look guilty. Instead, she tossed her hair back, a smirk playing on her lips. Oh, that. Just some expenses, darling. You know, for taking care of you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Expenses? She had spent nearly all of my disability pension on clothes and fancy gadgets. But that's all the money I have for the month, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Karen rolled her eyes. Oh, please, stop playing the victim. You know I deserve some compensation for dealing with a cripple like you. The word stung more than I thought it would. I had come to terms with my disability, but hearing her say it like that, it was as if all my insecurities came rushing back. Karen, you can't just use my money like that. I need it for my medications, for living. I tried to reason with her, but it was like talking to a brick wall. She laughed, a cold, heartless sound. Oh, please, you can barely walk, let alone do anything else. You should be grateful someone like me even looks your way. I felt the tears well up, but I refused to let them fall. Karen had become a monster, a far cry from the woman I thought I loved. I remembered when we first met, how she seemed so understanding, so kind. But that was all a facade, a mask she wore to lure me in. The days that followed were a blur. Karen's true nature became more and more apparent. She would throw parties at our house, inviting strangers who didn't even know my name. I was just the crippled guy in the corner, someone to be pitied or worse, ignored. Then came the day I found her laughing with one of her friends. He's so useless. Can't even get out of bed without help. It's like having a child, she said, not realizing I was within earshot. That was the last straw. I knew I had to leave, but with my limited mobility and financial resources, it seemed impossible. The next evening, when Karen decided to throw another party, the house was filled with people, loud music blaring, and there I was, sitting in my wheelchair, invisible to everyone. That's when I heard her, Karen, talking to someone in the kitchen. I'm only with him for the money. Once it runs out, I'm gone. I felt my heart break. But it was also a moment of clarity. I couldn't let her control my life anymore. I wheeled myself to where she was, everyone's eyes on me. Karen, it's over. I want you out of my house, out of my life, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. The room fell silent. Karen looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. You can't be serious! You need me! But I didn't. Not anymore. I'd rather struggle on my own than be with someone who sees me as nothing but a cash cow. Karen left, her departure marked not by tearful goodbyes, but by a cold, indifferent silence. The house felt empty, but it was a peaceful emptiness, a relief from the constant chaos Karen had brought into my life. In the days that followed, I struggled to adjust to life without her. But I also felt a newfound sense of freedom, a chance to start over, to be more than just someone's burden. The story doesn't have a happy ending. There are no miraculous recoveries or sudden fortunes. But there is a sense of hope, a belief that even in the darkest of times, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. For me, that light was rediscovering my love for writing, turning my pain into words, and finding solace in the stories I could tell. Wow, what a powerful story. It's heartbreaking to hear how Karen took advantage of someone's vulnerability like that. But I'm so glad the narrator found the strength to stand up for themselves and break free from that toxic relationship. Sending love and support to anyone who has experienced something similar. Stay strong, friends. As I sat there, heartbroken and angry, I couldn't help but wonder how it had all come to this. My husband's favoritism had torn our family apart, pushing our sons to the brink of cutting ties with their own father. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey filled with tears, apologies, and a desperate hope for redemption. Here's how it all went down. I want to start by saying my husband is a good man. He provides a very comfortable life for me and our children. He has never been abusive or manipulative. He's never kept secrets or cheated. But he has one huge flaw. He has a favorite child. We have 3 teenage sons. They are Mason, 18 years old, Kyle, 15 years old, and Sean, 13 years old. Our youngest son, Sean, is my husband's favorite. He knows this, I know this, and what really upsets me is that our children know it. It wasn't always like this. He used to be equally loving to all of our boys. But when Sean was 5 years old, he got pneumonia and was dangerously close to death. It was obviously an extremely tough time for my husband and me. And throughout the entire hospital stay, Sean always wanted his dad above anyone else. It bonded them. Ever since then, my husband has always favored and spoiled Sean to the detriment of his relationships with Mason and Kyle. The 2 older boys noticed and were understandably hurt as they got older that their father always favored Sean. Throughout the years, I had several conversations with my husband about the need for him to realize that he has 3 sons, not just 1. He would listen and make an effort to be more involved with Mason and Kyle, but it was always temporary. He would always go back to being super dad to Sean. Today, this issue reached its breaking point when Kyle's school held an awards ceremony where he would receive an award. Due to COVID-19, the event was virtual since the boys are doing online distance learning. The event consisted of a large group video call where the kids would be recognized for their academic achievements, and there was a raffle for several prizes. Kyle was excited because one of the prizes was a game system he wanted. Parents were invited to join the call on their own computers to earn an extra entry for raffle prizes on behalf of their children. I couldn't attend because of work, so I asked my husband to drop in and watch when Kyle's name was called, hoping it would slightly increase his chances of winning the prize he wanted. Keep in mind, this was a virtual event. All he had to do was visit the website and stay for less than half an hour. School events like this, even before COVID-19, were always more my responsibility. My husband rarely attended these events due to work commitments, though he would make sure to show up for one of Sean's events. However, he has been mostly working from home, and he wasn't even on the clock during the event. He agreed to do it. On the day of the event, I reminded him before leaving for work to make sure he attended. While at work, I sent him the invite link again just to be sure he had it, and he assured me he would be there. However, the event came and went. Kyle was in his room on his own laptop for the event, but my husband never joined the group call. I was busy at work, so I couldn't message him until almost an hour after the event ended. I asked how it went. He said he was trying to join, but the link didn't work. I asked what did he mean he was trying to join now when the event was an hour ago. He replied, "Oh, I thought you said it was now." I saw red. He missed the event because he got the time wrong. After I told him several times what time and exactly how to join, all he had to do was click the link at the right time. I was furious, but I wanted to wait until I got home to talk to him. So I get home and see our oldest son Mason's car in our driveway. He does not live with us anymore. He is in college and has his own apartment. I walk inside and Sean is in the living room looking upset. I ask him what's wrong and he says the other boys are fighting with Dad. I asked what happened and he said he doesn't know, just that Kyle got really mad and called Mason when he told Kyle that he and my husband went to get frozen yogurt earlier. I asked what time they went and he tells me it was 10 minutes before Kyle's event. He missed the event because he chose to take Sean to get frozen yogurt. I learned later that Sean was begging him, and my husband, as usual, caved and took him. At that moment, Mason, Kyle, and my husband all come down the stairs. They're yelling, and Mason has a duffel bag with Kyle's things. I asked what's happening, and Mason says he's taking Kyle with him to stay at his apartment for a while. I told him Kyle can stay the night, but he can't just move in with him. My husband said that Kyle is not leaving, and he needs to talk to him privately, but Mason blew up on him. He said everyone knows Sean is his favorite, and he couldn't tell Sean to wait 30 minutes before taking him to get yogurt. I told Mason I understood his anger, but that we all needed to sit down and talk. Kyle joins in and says that he's tired of his dad always choosing Sean over the two of them and he wants to stay with Mason. My husband was apologizing and saying he doesn't choose Sean over them, he just made a mistake. Mason challenges my husband, saying, "You always just make mistakes that leave me and Kyle on the back burner," and told him to try to remember the last time he did something with either him or Kyle alone. My husband listed 2 events. Mason reminded him that Sean tagged along for both. My husband said they're family, and of course he's allowed to go with. Kyle shouted back that my husband has taken out-of-town trips with just him and Sean 3 times in the last year and a half. And he was right. Sean got visibly upset at this point. Mason said he was sorry and that this wasn't about anything he did wrong, that it was their dad's fault, not his. Sean went upstairs to his room. My husband started after him, and Mason said, "See, you've got 3 upset sons and you still run off to coddle Sean." My husband said that's not true. He's just more sensitive than the other boys. Mason told him he wants so badly for Sean to be his only son that he can have his wish. He said not to call or text him or Kyle anymore, and that they don't have a dad anymore. Kyle added, "You already act like we don't exist anyway." My husband's face dropped. The way he was neglecting our 2 older boys finally hit him. I was a sobbing mess. I could see the hurt in both my sons' eyes. I told them to stay so we could talk and find a solution. Kyle begged me to just let him leave, saying he didn't want to be in the house anymore. Mason hugged me and assured me he'd make sure Kyle got his schoolwork done and he'd call me tomorrow. I let them go. As much as I want Kyle here, I know he needs time away from my husband. My husband went to the kitchen and cried. He's never been an emotional man, but the reality of our 2 older boys wanting to go no contact with him finally knocked some sense into him. I wanted to yell and scream at him. I told him for years that he needed to stop favoring one child. All he had to do was show up one goddamn time for Kyle. I'm so angry. Instead, I told my husband that I love him and I know he's hurt, so I'm not going to yell at him. But I told him I love my children more, and that if he didn't fix things with his boys and start treating them equally from this moment forward, I would be divorcing him. He just said, "I don't want to lose my family." He started to get up, saying he should make sure Sean was okay. I told him I would check on Sean, and for once, he needed to think of his other sons. I admit I was passive-aggressive, but my blood was boiling, and I was trying my best not to tear my husband down any more than my son's parting words had. I spent the next hour consoling Sean and reassuring him that his brothers don't hate him, and that their issue is with my husband, not him. He said they won't text him back, and I said he needs to give them time. I'm emotionally exhausted. I don't know what to do. My husband is sleeping in the guest room tonight. We've never not slept in the same bed unless one of us is out of town for one reason or another. Is it worth divorcing my husband over if he doesn't fix it? This is the only big issue we've ever had in our marriage, but he broke my children's hearts. And even if we do stay together, I don't know if I can ever forgive him for that. I feel like a failure as a mother for not being more assertive with my husband and not interfering throughout all these years. I also feel like it may be too late for him to make things right at this point. What do I do? What can I do? A few weeks after Mason called me, as he promised, and said Kyle was settling in fine, I asked how they felt about Sean. Mason said that he and Kyle talked last night, and while they don't necessarily blame Sean, it's still hard not to be slightly angry at him, especially because we can all see that Sean realizes he's the favorite and leans into it. In the end, both boys texted Sean that they weren't mad, but needed time away to cool off. Sean was, of course, sad, but I did get through to him that sometimes people need space. A couple of days later, I dropped Sean off at Mason's apartment, and the boys had a movie game night. I'm not sure what was said, but Sean came back much happier, and his brothers are texting him back again. I knew they would be okay, but I was glad that Mason and Kyle are mature and kind-hearted enough to not hold on to their anger towards Sean. Regarding my husband, I admit I was weak, and I caved the night of the incident. I went to the guest room, and my husband was still awake and on his laptop. I asked what he was doing, and he showed me the screen. He was searching for therapists. I never brought this up as a suggestion. He did it on his own. I asked why he was looking for a therapist, and he said because he feels like he's only going to get one chance to make things right with the boys, and he wanted a professional to tell him the best way to do so. It lifted so much of my fears and anxiety about how he felt. I cried and I told him to come back to our room. He took the next day off work. In our entire 22 years of marriage, he has called out of work less than 5 times. He talked to 3 different therapists for roughly an hour each before deciding he liked the second one best. He's an older man with adult children, and my husband said he felt like the therapist could relate to him and understand his situation best. I was so proud of him. His therapist suggested sending a short apology and promise of working on himself. Both his therapist and I read the text but did not change or influence him in any way. The words are entirely his own. He wrote, "I'm sorry, I messed up. For years I messed up. I hate that I let it get to this point, and I hate that I hurt you both so badly. I love you. I will always love you, and I know you may not want to talk to me right now, but I've just started therapy, and I hope in time that you boys will forgive me and give me a chance to be better for both of you. There is so much more I want to say, but I would like to say it in person. You can always call me, text me, or come home when you're ready to talk. Anytime. I will drop whatever I'm doing when you're ready to talk. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I love you boys. Love, Dad." Kyle called me a couple of hours after my husband sent them the text and asked me to come over. I did. Mason and Kyle were there, and they asked me if their dad really wrote the message. I assured them that he did, and reiterated that neither I nor his new therapist wrote a single word of his apology. It was all him. They admitted it felt good to know that he did care, but they needed time. This was also when we talked about Sean. A week went by with no response to my husband's text. Then another. He was heartbroken. He broke down in our bedroom one night and just cried, saying he'd ruined his relationship with his sons, and they were never going to forgive him. I reassured him that wasn't the case, but it was hard for him to accept. I told him he needs to keep talking to his therapist and focus on himself. His relationship with Sean changed as well. Even though he was the only son we had in our home, he started to spend less time with him, and Sean was completely fine with this. His therapist helped him realize that he was the one always initiating hangout time with Sean. He'd go to his room and ask Sean if he wanted to do something, or he'd tell Sean to go with him when he went to pick up dinner or go run errands. 5 days ago, Kyle finally texted my husband asking if they could talk. My husband said absolutely and asked where Kyle wanted him to go. Kyle said he and Mason wanted to come to the house. My husband, true to his word, called his boss and said he needed the rest of the day off for a family emergency. I dropped Sean off at my mother's house so the boys could talk openly to my husband without worrying about hurting Sean's feelings. And they came over, and we all talked in the living room. It wasn't easy. We all cried. But my husband did everything right. I repeat, he did everything right. He apologized. He didn't deny his favoritism. He told the boys about his work with his therapist and how it was helping. He said he's learned he justified his favoritism by telling himself that he and Sean were just closer. But he now realized they were only closer because he was putting the majority of his time and effort towards Sean instead of all three of the boys. My husband asked for one chance to show them he has, and will continue to change and treat them equally. Kyle accepted his apology. Mason said he wants to, but he feels like it's too late for him and my husband as he's already out of the house. My husband told Mason that he is Mason's father for life and asked him again for just a single chance. Mason agreed that he doesn't want to not have his dad in his life, but he doesn't want to feel that pain again if he lets him in. He asked the boys what specifically they need from him, besides him making improvements in how he communicates with them. Mason said he doesn't want it to feel forced. He wants it to be genuine. Kyle wanted a hug. My husband hugged him and cried and swore that whenever he has an event, he will put multiple alarms on his phone the second he's told about it. My husband suggested family counseling. The boys are reluctant, but they did agree to go as we all want our family to heal and grow stronger. Kyle moved back into the house and said he's happy because his bed is much more comfortable than Mason's couch. We decided Saturdays will be a family day that we all spend together. My husband has said he will reach out to the boys to see if they are free to get lunch. Not much else we can do until COVID is gone. He started playing video games with the boys just as something to do to spend time with them. He gets on the mic and talks to Mason, which he said feels good to talk to him, even though they're mostly just talking about stuff going on in the video game. He plans on buying Kyle the PS5 he wanted from the school event, but his therapist suggested he wait until their relationship is healed, so he knows it's a genuine gift and not an apology gift. I agree with this, and that's where we're at. My husband and I have been recommended a few family counselors from his therapist and are in the process of talking to them. He's really taking point on this. He's going to continue seeing his therapist as he said it's helped in more than just this incident. I admit that I still have some fears that this new attitude won't last, but this is so much more effort than he has ever put in when I mentioned his favoritism before. I'm really hopeful that this is only the beginning. The boys are already much happier, and seeing all the men in my life talking and laughing together just melts my heart. This is what I wanted all these years, and I'm hopeful that with family counseling and my husband continuing his therapy, this can be a lifelong change. I know this is not an instant fix, and it will take much longer and continued dedication and effort from my husband for us to truly heal as a family. But we are committed to therapy as it's worked at opening the door for healing. I've made it clear to him that if he reverts to his old ways and hurts our kids again, I will be gone. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for them to let him back in after just a few weeks of no contact, and I will not stand by if it happens again. That being said, as of now, I have no reason to believe he is not dedicated to this change, and for the sake of my family, I will give him the same single chance my children have given him. It's up to him to use it wisely. Thank you again, and wish me luck. It's important to acknowledge that your older sons have spent their formative years aware of their father's favoritism, and they may still experience resentment from time to time. Healing from this isn't a linear process, and there will be ups and downs. Hold your husband accountable and remind him not to take their forgiveness for granted. Permanent change is rare, but for the sake of your family, I hope this is one of those times. As the longtime caretaker of my church's multimedia system, I never expected that a confrontation with an entitled individual would lead to the resignation of a promising new member. Tensions rise, mistakes are made, and hurtful words are exchanged, ultimately causing a sudden departure. Here's how it all went down. I have been in charge of my church's multimedia system since it opened about 20 years ago, so I have extensive experience with the software, timing, and multitasking in that department. Additionally, I'm familiar with most songs, allowing me to anticipate and select the appropriate lyrics based on the music instrument's pattern without hesitation. Recently, one of the other experienced multimedia team members has been unavailable for about 3 months. To fill this gap, we have some new individuals who are interested in the field. Some have prior experience, while others are completely new to multimedia. The person I am currently training falls into the latter category. I believe in the value of hands-on experience, considering mistakes as the fastest way to learn. Following this principle, the person I am training, let's call her Anne, occasionally makes minor mistakes. I closely monitor her and provide guidance and corrections to ensure a smooth flow of the service. So far, there have been no complaints, and she is improving steadily until last week's service. One of the singers is my friend's mother, Karen in the story. Karen tends to be loud, obnoxious, and unafraid to voice her opinions, regardless of others' feelings. Before the service, she advised Anne not to be late with the lyrics, as most of the songs were new and not in our native language. Our country of origin primarily speaks a non-English language, and we are currently in the USA. Having dealt with Karen for years, I simply told Anne to ignore her and focus on her tasks. Karen had a displeased expression on her face as we disregarded her advice and left. However, Anne couldn't completely shake off what Karen had said and subsequently made more mistakes during the service. Anne missed some cues and timing on pulling up the correct lyrics, approximately 5 times. She also made some spelling errors, and the translations weren't entirely accurate. We translated the lyrics to ensure understanding in both languages. Nevertheless, these were minor mistakes that went unnoticed by most people. Karen, on the other hand, glared at our section each time a mistake occurred. I reassured Anne to stay focused and not let others' opinions affect her, emphasizing that making mistakes is acceptable as long as she learns from them. Thankfully, she performed well during her 4th week, and I'm pleased with her progress. After the service, Karen rushed straight to our booth, bypassing the crowds leaving the building, and began yelling at Anne in a quiet manner. This surprised me because despite dealing with Karen's attitude for years, I had never seen this side of her before. It was truly bizarre. Karen insulted Anne for all her mistakes, claiming that Anne made her look bad on stage by not being able to sing properly. I tried to intervene, telling Karen to keep her opinions to herself, but she didn't care and continued to insult Anne until she started crying. My friend, who saw her mom at the booth, came to our aid and dragged her away. I told Karen that she had no right to tell Anne what to do since she had no prior experience in multimedia. Despite this, Karen continued to yell insults at Anne as she walked away. I tried to comfort Anne, assuring her that everyone else, aside from Karen, appreciated her service and that she should be proud of herself. In my opinion, she did a great job considering she only does multimedia 4 times a month. However, Karen's words deeply affected Anne, causing her to leave for the bathroom and not return for the second service, which is specifically for afternoon members. I ended up taking over her responsibilities. After the second service, Karen once again went to our booth and was surprised to find Anne not there. I informed her that Anne had left because of her hurtful words. Karen defended herself, claiming that she was only trying to encourage Anne to improve for the next time, and walked away without apologizing. Today, I learned that Anne is no longer interested in serving as the multimedia person. It's disheartening because she was actually improving a lot, but quit because of Karen's words. I just hope that she will still attend as a member and perhaps regain her interest in multimedia in the future. Edit. For those wondering why the pastor didn't do anything, it's because he was unaware of what was happening. After the service, his priority is to be at the door to greet and wish the leaving guests a great day. With an average of 150 guests leaving each service, there is a lot of chit-chat and commotion happening, with people walking here and there. Although the guests leave in an organized manner, it's impossible for the pastor to see the booth as they near the exit. This entire incident took less than 2 minutes, which is not enough time for all the guests to leave the building. After all the guests leave, the pastor's next priority is to greet the next service's guests, as there is only a 30-minute gap between the end of the first service and the start of the second service. Therefore, I couldn't find the time to sit down with him in between. I received a text a few moments ago from Karen's son, who is also a friend of mine. He serves as the worship leader, and as soon as he heard that Anne left the serving team, he apologized to me. I assured him that I didn't blame him because it wasn't his fault. I mentioned that Karen's behavior was out of character since she joined the church. This was the first time I had seen her act like that, and it concerns me. He explained that his mom hasn't been working for several weeks due to a slow season at her workplace, which has left her frustrated. However, he didn't defend her actions and agreed that it was no excuse to behave poorly towards new service members. He promised that she would apologize tomorrow and admit her wrongdoing in front of me, Anne, and the pastor. If she doesn't, he will make sure she no longer serves at the church. We will see what happens tomorrow. Anne informed the pastor about the incident herself. As soon as he heard that she left the serving team, he contacted her and then reached out to me for more details. I plan to discuss it with him in person tomorrow, but since he already knows, I shared everything with him. Like me, he is also concerned about Karen's behavior, as he hasn't witnessed it before. I told him about what my friend told me regarding Karen's frustrations, and he was disappointed that she let her personal problems affect someone else's potential. After brainstorming for about 5 minutes, we came up with a solution. We decided that Karen will not be allowed to serve until Anne decides to return to multimedia on her own terms. We shared this decision with everyone on the serving team, except Karen and Anne, as we didn't want Karen to blame Anne further, or for Anne to feel guilty about leaving. The pastor will personally speak with Karen and deliver the message. Anne will continue attending church, but she won't be serving for now, which is a positive outcome. After everything that happened, it's important for us to remember the impact our words can have on others. Let's strive to be kind and supportive, especially to new members who are still learning and growing. Together, we can create a welcoming and nurturing environment for everyone in our church community. As I sat there listening to my coworker's cruel words directed at my terminally ill sister, I couldn't help but feel a surge of anger and protectiveness. The tension in the room was palpable, and I knew something had to be done. Little did I know, this encounter was just the beginning of a twisted battle that would test our strength and resilience. Here's how it all went down. This will be a brief but brutal account. My younger sister has terminal cancer and has been given a prognosis of 4 years. Despite not experiencing any symptoms yet, she continues to go to work every day. The company she works for is small, consisting of only 10 employees with no human resources department. Unfortunately, one of those 10 individuals lacks reason or empathy. This woman is currently 5 months pregnant and continuously makes inappropriate remarks towards my sister. During one incident, she entered my sister's office, placed my sister's hand on her own stomach, and said, "Now you have another reason to fight." She also made comments such as, "Pregnancy is going around. Guess you don't have to worry about that." My sister previously battled ovarian cancer and underwent a hysterectomy. In another instance, she stated, "Your body is growing things it shouldn't, and my body is growing exactly what I wanted." While discussing next year's conference, she remarked, "I'll be pregnant, so it's all you." My sister replied, "Well, it usually is, but I'm dying, so you'll have to figure something out." My sister doesn't have the energy or inclination to give this situation her full attention, so she has been ignoring it or responding with comebacks like the one mentioned above. Although I appreciate her clever responses, they haven't deterred the pregnant woman from making these hurtful comments. Do you have any advice on how to handle this situation? My sister often vents to me and our best male friend. Recently, a pregnant coworker left a comment on my sister's Facebook post about her battle with cancer, making a self-centered remark about her own pregnancy. While my sister and I were brainstorming appropriate responses, our male friend responded in a harsh and insensitive manner. This upset my sister, who deleted her reply and withdrew from the conversation. The next morning, my sister met with her boss to address the situation proactively. Surprisingly, her boss shrugged it off, saying, "This is what happens when you talk crazy outside of church. Did I mention they're in a small mountain town?" Essentially, the boss gave my sister permission to confront the pregnant coworker as necessary. While I believe a warning or reprimand would have been more appropriate, I am relieved that the manager is at least somewhat supportive. The pregnant coworker later visited my sister's office and apologized sincerely, displaying a submissive attitude. Since then, she has been overly accommodating and has avoided discussing her pregnancy or downplaying my sister's terminal cancer. It seems that all we needed was the audacity of a confident, privileged individual with nothing to lose. You know what? It's funny how sometimes it just takes one person, someone with the confidence and audacity to stand up and make a difference, even in the toughest of circumstances. It's like a spark that ignites a fire of positive change. A gripping tale of a woman caught between family loyalty and her own boundaries as she grapples with the responsibility of her sister-in-law constantly leaving her child at her doorstep. The escalating tension reaches its breaking point, leading to a shocking confrontation. Here's how it all went down. I, 30-year-old female, have a half-brother, Enzo, 40-year-old male. We are not very close since we were both raised with our respective mothers, but he has always gone out of his way to help me with anything I have needed. Enzo married his wife, Steph, 33-year-old female, 2 years ago. Steph has a daughter, Alice, 4 years old, with her ex but has sole custody, and Enzo and Steph have a 7-month-old son, Teddy. I also have a 3-year-old daughter. Enzo and Steph moved to the city I live in when Steph got pregnant, and since then, Steph developed a habit of showing up at my apartment building unannounced. It became a problem, and I talked to both her and Enzo about it, and she stopped until she gave birth. Now she regularly drops by unannounced to leave Alice at my building for babysitting, while she has to run errands or something. Can you believe this? I vent to my friend over the phone. It's like my place has become her personal daycare. She's had her carpool drop Alice off at my apartment before. I'm at my limit, I confess to my housekeeper, who nods sympathetically. You shouldn't have to deal with Alice arriving unexpectedly while I'm out. It's not fair to you. I've told the concierge not to let her up and to say no one is in. But then I'll arrive to Alice waiting in the lobby, which is not safe. Frustrated, I confront the concierge. I thought I made myself clear. She can't just leave Alice here. The concierge responds, guilt-ridden. I'm sorry, but I can't be responsible for a child. We're not equipped for that. Steph keeps saying she only does it when she's desperate. In a heated phone call, I challenge her. Desperate? Twice a week? That's not desperation. That's taking advantage. Frankly, I'm not a nanny, and if she's desperate, she needs to hire some help. This has to stop, Steph. I'm not your nanny. You need to find real help, I assert firmly on the phone. I've spoken to Enzo, and he is always extremely apologetic and says he will talk to her. I'm really sorry, Enzo says over the phone, his voice filled with regret. I'll talk to her, I promise. But he also works during the day and can't police where she is at all hours. I understand, Enzo, but this can't continue, I reply, my voice laced with exhaustion. I reached my breaking point a couple of days ago when I returned from lunch to find Alice at home, having been dropped off since she had a half day at school. Alice, sweetheart, what are you doing here? My voice is a mix of concern and frustration as I kneel down to her level. I apologized profusely to my housekeeper who had spent time playing babysitter and called Steph. No answer. I called her several times, and then Enzo, who was on a business trip and distraught over the situation. Steph isn't picking up, I tell Enzo, trying to keep my voice steady. You need to sort this out. It's not fair to any of us, least of all Alice. Steph eventually turned up a couple of hours later, and I was beyond furious. The moment I saw her, I exploded. If you ever leave Alice here again, I swear I will call social services. I'll call them every single time you dump her off. This is not my job, Steph. You're being irresponsible and neglectful. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded with me. Please, I just need some help with Alice. But I was resolute, my voice unwavering. No, Steph. I never agreed to this in the first place. You can't just keep dumping your child on me. She tried to guilt-trip me, her voice quivering. But you're the only one I can rely on. I was too exhausted and upset to be swayed. I can't do this anymore, I said firmly, closing the door on her attempts to manipulate my emotions. Eventually, my husband stepped in, his tone firm but calm. You need to leave, Steph. This isn't right, and it's not fair to any of us. As she left, the weight of the situation hung heavily in the air. I knew I had made the right decision, but the emotional toll of the whole ordeal was overwhelming. My husband and I exchanged a look of mutual understanding and exasperation, knowing this was a boundary that had to be set, no matter how hard it felt. I feel bad because, as I said, Enzo has never been anything but the most accommodating person where I'm concerned, and maybe treating his wife like that was harsh. But at the same time, I chose to have one kid because I don't want another one. Steph can't use my house as a daycare. Was I too harsh? Upon reflection, it is clear that navigating family dynamics and establishing boundaries can be complex and challenging. In this particular situation, I had to prioritize the well-being of my own family and myself. While it may have been difficult, and perhaps even harsh, I firmly believe that making the tough decisions to protect my own sanity and maintain my boundaries was necessary. I never thought a simple dinner with my mother-in-law would take such a dark turn. As we sat there, she looked me in the eyes and uttered chilling words of a threat, leaving me stunned and speechless. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a twisted game that would test the limits of my sanity and my marriage. Here's how it all went down. My mother-in-law and I went out to dinner as my husband and my father-in-law were out at a concert together. They are from out of state and were staying with us for a few days. My mother-in-law is intense and does not hold back on overly displaying how much she loves her son. Well, at dinner, after 3 martinis and me completely sober as my husband and I are trying to conceive, she looks at me and says, "If you ever break my son's heart, I will freaking kill you. I mean it. And his sister will too. She watches a lot of Dateline." I was so stunned that she said this after 6 years together and understanding how strong our relationship is. Her words in another conversation, "I couldn't have asked for a better wife for my son. You two are a perfect match and so blessed." Unfortunately, I was so stunned that I did not respond the way that I wanted and kind of babbled on something about not needing to be worried. I told my husband this and he was appalled. My question is, when she undoubtedly says something offensive like this again, is there a way to respond that is stronger and defensive of myself? I just really can't believe the tone with which she said it, and while this is not the first time she has said it, it felt intense. This whole experience was a major wake-up call to not allow someone to speak to me this way and reevaluate boundaries and people-pleasing tendencies. It also makes me realize that I am not alone, and I have several strong women in this community who stand up for themselves and are learning these lessons too. I would also like to add that never did I feel my life was in danger. I understand the severity of what she said, however, she tends to be dramatic. And this phrase is something I have heard her say to many others, including my husband's friends, for taking him on a hiking trip, wow, how horrible, and myself. This does not change how seriously we reacted to the comment. So, fast forward to the day they left, the morning after the incident. My mother-in-law begins to send text after text with the most effusive love and support you could imagine regarding her stay with us and our loving home. We ignore them because we are both working. And also, who cares? The plan was for my husband to call her after work. She knows something is up because now she is calling me. I let it go to voicemail. And having her husband, who rarely messages me, to see if I'll reply. My husband calls her as soon as he gets home and absolutely blasts her. While he was firm and calm, there was no mistaking that she was silent while he told her how unacceptable, disappointing, disturbing, and unnecessary that comment was. Her response? That's just how I talk. My husband explains that no one speaks to his wife like that, and no one understands her disjointed state of mind except for her. The call ends. She calls him back 10 minutes later. Classic move once she's thought about what manipulative thing to say, and we ignore it. The following day rolls around and she calls again, this time saying that she was joking and we took it the wrong way. My husband confronts her again, and we decide that I will never be left alone with her. The hilarious thing about it is that dinner was the first time we were ever alone. My husband finally lets me know for the first time ever that he has understood his mom's games since high school, and that it is partly the reason he moved out of state. It goes way deeper than this, but wow, eye-opening. For now, I am no contact with her, and it looks like my husband will be too. Monster-in-laws are no joke. Be safe out there. This situation highlights the significance of establishing boundaries and asserting oneself. It was an unexpected and eye-opening experience that provided insights into the intricacies of family dynamics. If you enjoyed today's stories, check out the other videos on your screen now. Submit your own stories at you'rethejerk.com. Subscribe now, or you're definitely the jerk.